Welcome to Off the Shelf. I'm your host, Yvonne Wolf. Today we have a special guest, our first special guest from Britain, Alastair Davie. Alastair, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to talking to you.
So tell me, how did you start writing this book that's taken 3 years in the making?
Yes, took me 3 years, but I'm interested in history, particularly 20th century history. And read about 16 different books, non-fiction books, to sort of as my research for this book.
Yes.
But it really started with a book I read about the Dublin tenements, which was really a documentary interviews for several people that lived in these awful conditions way back in the 1930s and 1920s. And I began to work on an idea for a storyline from that.
So can you tell me a little bit about the awful conditions, harsh conditions of this tenement living?
Well, the government of Ireland was transferred from Dublin in the late 1800s to London. And the rich people that were living in Dublin and working in the government there sold all their houses cheaply, quickly as they could, to get money back, and they all moved to London. And so they sold these houses to these landlords, who a family of, say, 6 people would live in one of these beautiful Georgian houses. When they left for London, and the slumlord took over, there were about 20 families living in this one building.
Oh my goodness.
The conditions were terrible. There was one lavatory for all 20 families.
Mm-hmm.
And it was cold, there was no electricity, there was no running water. I mean, it was appalling conditions.
And the children, they grew up fighting for some kind of substance, I would imagine.
Yes, a lot of them went to school, but they left very early, and they joined gangs, and a lot of crime as a result. I mean, appalling conditions really were.
Yes. Well, we have many Irish immigrants in Chicago, and perhaps they'll be interested in reading about what perhaps made their family leave
Yes,
Ireland. It's just horrible.
Yeah.
And your protagonist in your book, The Sixth Sense, is an Irish young man who grew up in this horrible place.
Yes. Well, he was a result of a rape. During the British occupation of Ireland, in 1926, there was an organization called the Black and Tans, and they were basically criminals hired by the British government from Glasgow and from Gorbals in Glasgow and from the East End of London. And their job was to basically, like a Gestapo, punish Irishmen, looking for IRA members. And as a result, they did very great deal of damage to people. And my protagonist was a result of his mother being raped by one of these people. Yes. So he had basically the seed of a bad seed within him,
Yes.
And that's how he became a sort of Jekyll and Hyde type of character.
Yes, this is a very exciting book to read, but it's also very dark. I find that in the beginning he's a young man, and yes, then he commits his first murder, but then I also think that the extenuating circumstance which he just commits this murder is almost acceptable. I know. I mean, I don't.
Well, that's
tell-
my whole point. It was
Yes.
try to show some symphony for the character.
Can you tell us a little bit about the situation he was in, which caused him to commit?
Well,
murder?
his mother, because of her rape by the Black and Tan, they destroyed his mother's house and the whole family in revenge, and so she had to live in the squalor of one of these tenement houses. By training, she was an accountant, but she was so messed up as a result of the awful rape and near death. She could only get jobs as a cleaning lady.
Yes.
And she did eventually. Both of them were Roman Catholic,
Yes.
like many Irish are. And she offered a job by the local priest as his
Cleaning lady. Yes.
cleaning lady, and then the priest got interested. He was a pedophile, unfortunately, and he got interested in the boy.
Yes.
And in fact, it actually raped the boy once.
Yes.
And that's what caused the Mr. Hyde to appear.
Up here, yes. And your character is a constant. Francis Reagan is a person who's always looking for survival. Like he is constantly being pushed to the corner to survive.
Right, right.
Yeah, and as a child, being molested or raped by this priest,
Yes.
he wasn't able to have a normal dating life as a teenager.
No.
And this priest is very powerful.
Well, the priest, you see, the trouble is in those days, and I don't know whether it's true today, but in those days the priest was all powerful, and so they were able to rule the roost, if you like, in their parishes, and could get away with a lot of things. That's why we have all these issues going on with Catholic priests at the moment.
Yes, I think that's also why in the 90s say many of the cases did not come forward because people they trusted the positions and the power of the priests, and they wouldn't think of confronting them, something like this. So there is still the same in our American contemporary life.
Right, right.
So and then when he rejected the priest, the priest fired his mother.
Fired his mother. She committed suicide as a result.
Yes.
Because she was quite determined not to go back to live in the slums, and now she was faced with doing that again.
Yes.
And so.
Well, you can see that her character has been in depression perhaps for many, many years, right?
Yes. Yeah. And she blames her son, not for what happened to her particularly. Well, she blames him she blames him for the original rape by the Black and Tan,
Yes.
and she blames him for what happened to her, how she was trying to survive.
Yes. Well, this isn't a story about well-adjusted and people who's been to therapy, right? So which is very realistic, because I think that in our current lifestyle, people think that we're all supposed to be psychologically balanced, and depression is something you can take care of with a pill.
Yeah.
But most American, or not just American history, but most people in the last century live with depression for years and years, and after World War II, there's even more people who live with depression.
That's right, yeah.
So when you finished writing this book, did you feel a sense of relief being able to write about a character who's survival is such iconic for World War II. Everyone was trying to survive.
Well, I think I did him, I think I tried to portray him in a good light. And his Mr. Hyde comes out when he's cornered, like a rat is cornered, and he fights back. And he did have a quiet period in his life in England, where he actually was a vicar.
Yes, as a vicar, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Ironic.
So that was the whole point. It was how everything turned around.
Yes.
But unfortunately, his past caught up with him, and so in the end, I won't give away the ending, but in the end, he was back escaping again.
Yes, it's a very fast-moving book. I find that he was he helping in emergency or the hospitals in the World War I, right? Yeah. As a I don't know, worker, right? And then next thing he's a POW, right? And then he was a spy, and so it's very fast moving. And I also thought of that it somewhat reminds me of the detective noir genre, except it's told not from detective point of view, but from this criminal that they're trying to corner. He runs in with them several times.
Yeah, it's when he gets involved in the Spanish Civil War as an ambulance driver.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
There were many Irishmen, by the way, that fought in the Spanish Civil War. And there was also many Americans there. Abraham Lincoln Brigade was one of them, one of the brigades that fought there. The Germans used the Spanish Civil War as a practice run for the Second World War, in that they used bombing by aircraft, and they basically improved their techniques by working with Franco in the Spanish Civil War, and they were also looking for people they could turn to become spies, especially Irishmen, because they knew that the Irish were against the British, and they would volunteer quite happily to do that.
So their loyalties were more manipulable.
Yes, yes.
Wow.
And our character was caught in this concentration camp in the Spanish Civil War, and to get out of that, he volunteered to go to Germany and become a spy in Belfast.
And now he, a sinner of many ways, right, becomes a vicar. It could be almost a double character with the priest that was so heinous to him.
He became a vicar in Notting Hill. Now, Notting Hill today is one of the most expensive areas to buy property in London. But in the 50s, when he was there, it was a slum area. Again, these beautiful Georgian houses were bought by slumlords, and so that several families were living in the one house, and most of these people were from the West Indies, because after the Second World War there was a shortage of manpower because people were killed, of course.
Right.
So the British government encouraged some West Indians to move and take jobs, but no one would sell property to them or rent rooms to them. So they had to go to the slumlords. So you got 5 or 6 people living in one room. You know, it was again the same sort of thing as was in Dublin.
Yes.
And
so there's a double place, a location that he's back in.
yeah, yeah. And so he was a priest there, and trying to fight against some of the social issues that these people faced. And as a result, he annoyed the church authorities, and they wanted to get rid of him, basically. So they found him a job in a little village in Devon, England, which is a very countrified area.
So Alastair, you're working on another book?
I'm working on another one, yes. This one's a little bit different. It's about the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, lived in the Bahamas. He was governor there for a while.
This is after he abdicated?
During the war.
It's after he abdicated,
Yeah,
correct?
yes, it's after he abdicated. They were very pro-Nazi, and Churchill gave him this governorship to get him out of the way, actually, to keep him well away from Europe.
Yes.
Because there was a big fear that he would be kidnapped. In fact, he was nearly kidnapped when he was escaping through Spain and Portugal before he went to the Bahamas. And it is about a doctor who goes to the Bahamas as an RAF. The Royal Air Force had 2 training areas on the island for bomber pilots.
I see.
And they trained them because we were way away from Europe and all its problems, and they sent them back to Europe, Far East, and to the Middle East after they were trained.
You have been a writer or PR writing before, marketing as well.
Well, I
right?
used to work for Reuters and Financial Times in London before I came over here.
Yes, in the 1970s.
Yeah. So I've been basically writing news stories, feature articles, and I came over here and other things I wrote. But it's different. Writing news stories or feature stories is totally different from writing a book. With a book, you paint a picture.
Yes.
And with the news, you have to be very succinct and very quick getting the story out there,
Well, that's a good imagery, painting a picture.
Yeah.
That is what writing a book is. Do you have any advice for our viewers who are aspiring writers at home?
Persistence.
Persistence?
I think that's very important, because you have. You remember the old story about the blank piece of paper in the typewriter? Well, it happens, and you just got to give up for the day and then go back to it. You've got to persist with it. And one of the problems I had, and that's why I self-published this book, was because I couldn't get a literary agent to take it.
Mm.
And I was in contact with 380 agents.
Wow.
Well, some here,
Yes.
and some in the UK.
Yes.
I just, it was impossible to try and get them interested. And I thought, well, to heck with it, I'll do it myself. Mm. So I did.
So Alastair, what made you move here?
Oh boy, it's a long story. Years ago, I was in the Royal Marine Commandos, which is Special Forces.
Yes.
And I was attached to the US Marine Corps in Camp Lejeune, and for a while. And I had some friends in Chicago, so I came, when I left Camp Lejeune, I went to Chicago to see my friends, and I met my wife.
Oh.
Well, at least it wasn't my wife at
Yes.
those days.
Yes.
But yes, I met her, and then went back to England, and we decided to get married.
She's American?
She's American, from Evanston.
So because of love.
So we spent, 3 years in London. And then I decided to come over here. And we lived in Evanston I don't know how many years, maybe 20 years.
Oh, good. Uh-huh.
And then I was offered a job in New Jersey, which I took and spent about 10 years there, and then came back to Evanston when we retired, and then moved to Northbrook. So that's basically roughly the synopsis of what happened to me coming over here.
That sounds like a nice story. And do you still go back to Britain?
Yes, I go back. We've been back probably once a year these days.
We're rather close, you know.
But I'm going back again in November to the Rugby World Cup, which is being held in the UK. I'm interested in rugby, and I played for a big London club when I was there, when I lived there. So I'm a life member of a club. So I go back to watch rugby.
That's a good reason. And are there rugby teams like in Australia too? And do you watch them? Or?
Yeah, there's the rugby teams here in Chicago. I suppose the Chicago Griffins and the Chicago Lions are the two top sides, but there are about 15 different sides here.
Wow.
All the universities have got rugby clubs.
Oh, I'm surprised.
It's amazing.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And thank you very much, Alastair, for coming to our program.
You're very welcome.
And thank you for joining us on Off the Shelf. I'm your host, Yvonne Wolf, and hope to join me again next time.